I didn't expect this video to be as hard to film as it has been. I planned for it to be just a lighthearted video, a celebration of my time on testosterone, but that's not how it's turned out. So I've had to step back and reframe it a bit. Today's not just a day of celebration for me, as much as I would like it to be. It's also a day of mourning. It's March 16th, 2022. 3 years ago, I started testosterone. 2 years ago, the pandemic really hit home for me for the first time. My campus, where I was living at the time, emptied out, and those of us who are allowed to stay, myself included, were sent into strict isolation. That day, I watched my friends and classmates board buses and prepare to be shuttled to various airports. I remember standing outside, holding a pair of branches up to my head like antlers, trying to make them smile while we waited for the buses to pull off. Once they did, I walked back to my dorm, now eerily quiet and empty, and I packed up my things, getting ready to be sent into pandemic housing. I don't know what exactly I did after that. It's been a while now. But I do know that at some point I sat on the floor in my dorm once everything was packed up and emptied, and I poured myself a drink. It was a pale imitation of the celebration that I had hoped to have with friends that day. I did have one moment of solace, though. I ran into a staff member who was still on campus, someone non-binary, someone who understood the importance of transition. I didn't talk to them very long, but I did let them know that that day I was 1 year on testosterone. They told me in the same breath, "Congratulations," and "I'm sorry." That was 2 years ago now. 2 more T-days spent in the pandemic. So while I wanted to celebrate today, it's really just left me feeling pretty somber. Maybe someday, this day will be able to be an unequivocally happy celebration, but I think that's going to take a while. I've talked about this before, but I know that having so much of my transition occur during the pandemic has affected the way I've lived through it. By it, I mean my transition, though I'm sure it's affected how I've lived through the pandemic as well. Some of this has been good. I've largely been able to avoid interacting with strangers, which has left me with less chances to be publicly misgendered or harassed. Granted, that comes from my own privilege. I was able to largely stay home during the pandemic, which not everyone was so lucky. But other aspects weren't as great. Transitioning at a time when I was only around family the majority of the time was difficult in ways that it might not have been otherwise. I'm not going to talk about my family at length, but suffice it to say that when the only people you're seeing on a daily basis are your family members, it's even more difficult when they don't understand. beyond that, undergoing some major changes at a time when I wasn't interacting with strangers left me not knowing how the general public read me. There has definitely been a transition period since I've been going back into public where I've had to figure out how the world sees me. I've had to negotiate what gendered spaces I can be in and how people are going to interact with me in certain spaces in ways that I wouldn't have had to. I had to, in some ways, relearn what I needed to do to keep myself safe in the public sphere. Add to this the non-trans and non-transition specific losses that I and many other people have undergone in the past 2 years. And it's understandable that today might be a difficult day. I do want to share some observations that I've had in the past year of transitioning that other people might find useful. I've noticed that a lot of timelines given for changes that one undergoes while on testosterone tend to state that the majority of changes stop at about the 2-year mark, with the exception possibly of facial hair and maybe weight redistribution. As such, a lot of the changes that I've continued to go through in the past year were gladly accepted. I was very happy for them, but they were unexpected. For example, my voice has definitely continued to drop in the past year, which is something that a lot of the advice I had seen indicated wouldn't happen. I've also had other changes continue. Bottom growth, facial hair, though I've already mentioned that one. Just various things that I did not expect have just continued. Granted, these changes have occurred at a slower rate, which is part of why it has been so long in between my update videos. They're definitely still going. I'm definitely not yet in a holding pattern of my transition. And I'm glad for that. I look forward to seeing what the coming years bring. And I hope that in addition to continued physical and social changes, I also get to experience a changed relationship with this particular day. I hope that eventually I'll be able to focus on this just as my testosterone anniversary and not also as the day the pandemic started for me. If you have questions about my transition or anything else, you can go ahead and leave comments. If this resonated with you at all, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, etc. I look forward to seeing you all in the next video, which will hopefully be a cheerier topic, though I can't promise that.